Welcome to NeedleXChange, conversations on the art of thread. My name's Jamie Chalmers, and in this episode I'm interviewing Sean Alistair, a Germany-based contemporary embroidery and textile artist known for work that mixes beauty, chaos, identity and emotional honesty. This is the first part of a three-part interview, our first ever triple header. Sean is also a curator, and in this episode we talk about his Into the Wild, an exhibition that Sean curated to build community rather than simply to put work on the walls. We talk about diversity without tokenism, what it means to be an outsider artist, labels like queer, bipolar and textile artist, and how Sean thinks about making, destroying and remaking work as part of the same creative life. Sean's a fantastic guy and it was a great chat, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'll be back next week with part 2 of 3, so until then, enjoy the show. So I've got 2 daughters and they're 8 and 6, and I've got the album. It's like a phenomenon. I think it's been shown like 350 million times on Netflix or something. It's this film. It's pretty reasonable animation, to be honest, but it's also got the songs, and the songs are quite catchy. And I've gone through this phase of listening to them and being like, meh, because the girls are liking them, then coming to appreciating them, to now have them as goddamn earworms every single day when I wake up. At the moment, I've just got K-pop demons. Like, presumably Sabrina Carpenter buried herself in there for quite a long time, I would have thought.
I mean, one lesson I'll take from my dad was he was such a music nut that we always had different music playing around the house. We never had like kids songs. That was never a thing for us. And so I remember being, maybe 6 or 7, and No Doubt was my favorite band. So I never listened to kid music. And so I said to my husband, John, I was like, no kid music, no gaga goo goo, nothing like that. I was like, we'll introduce you to real music and she'll choose what she wants, but we'll all play DJ. We'll all take turns playing DJ. So
yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. I always listen to those shows where there's like a musical person. They'll be like, yeah, when I was growing up, there was always music playing in the house and stuff. And like, we've got a record player in the dining room, and I'm always like funk and soul and like Ella Fitzgerald, all of these things, putting them in there. My wife's a bit more like indie. She's like Arctic Monkeys and stuff. And the kids kind of tune into that more, but I just feel like I'm laying the groundwork. I'm just burying it at the back of their unconscious so they'll understand. There is a thing which might be a saving grace. I don't know. There's this series called Rockabye Baby, and they are lullaby versions of things like the Foo Fighters, Elton John, AC/DC, loads of bands, David Bowie and all that, where even Bjork and stuff, but they're like plinky plonky versions. So it's a good trade-off because it's quite inoffensive music, but you feel like you can sing along to it. The Bjork one, to be honest, sounds exactly like Bjork, so that's not really a far shout. But some of them, like AC/DC and various other things, it's been all right. Guns N' Roses, loads of those. So I wanted to ask you then about Into the Wild, which is an exhibition that you've recently curated. And as someone who has curated an exhibition or two, I thought it would be a good place to start. Tell me all about it. It sounded like you went in a really interesting direction with it.
Yeah, so that was where was working before I went on parental leave. And my manager at the time found out that I was an artist. He found out that I was an artist and he offered me the space for my work. And I felt if I just took a solo show, that would be kind of gauche and kind of against everything I stand for. Now, I've had plenty of shows. I've had plenty of solo shows. I've had plenty of group shows. And solo shows are great because you get to show the whole breadth of your idea or your work, but it's not a great way to build community. Solo show or group shows are the best way to build community. And before I went to Vancouver, I was showing in Berlin a ton, and I met some very interesting people. It was extremely inspiring and a great way to build community. So initially I was like, I don't want to show my work. That would be boring. Like, no one cares. A few friends and family will come to see my show, but I'm like, I want to meet people. I want to build community. So I said, I have this idea. And we hadn't pitched it to anyone yet in head office. And I just went with it. I've always been a very precocious person. And I think in the world, you just have to kind of be that way. And so I put out a few stories on Instagram. And it was interesting because a few of my close friends or new close friends, they hopped right on the opportunity. And I was pitching it as, hey, I have this idea. It's not approved yet. And then as I slowly got more people interested, the more people who wanted to join it. Now, what was important to me about this is because I am an outsider artist, I don't have any schooling to back me. And in Vancouver, they really look at that. So many galleries would ignore my work that I was like, no, I want pretty much no like the entry is so easy. So it costs the artist nothing. Whatever if they sell any of their work, they get 100% of the profits. And then my only stipulations were all fine art, for the most part, all wall hanging, because all the services would be used for product, and then no prints. Unless it was photographic prints, it would be no prints. So all actual fine art. And then the theme was nature, however that inspired you. And that was it. I didn't look at the person's age, race, sexuality, gender expression, ethnicity, nothing like that. I didn't look at anything like that. I just was getting floods of stuff. And if I could fit it, I could fit it. And I was constantly kind of working. So eventually I had too many people. So I kind of, went to head office and I was like, hey, I have like 30 artists. I think it was 25. It might have gone up to 30. And I said, hey, they want to do this show. And then when I calculated, you have to do numbers. If the individual merchandiser taught me anything, you have to give them numbers. And I'm like, oh yeah, with like one impression, you would have like 200,000 eyes on Instagram. And they're like, ooh, they really liked those numbers. And so as I was curating the show, and as I the other stipulation was that we had an opening event, a closing event, and that everyone had to be there. A few people couldn't, but they spoke to me, but pretty much everyone was there. And I looked around me, and it was true diversity. And so we had people with disabilities, we had people with different gender expressions, different ethnic backgrounds, different experiences, different schooling. And I feel it was the most kind of authentic show to build community. And it's everything that I stand for, because I've had such, terrible experiences that I would say, instead of complaining, just be a part of the solution. So, and again, the company, they really liked that. They want to get people into nature. And I thought it's such a beautiful idea, where I think every artist is somehow inspired by nature, and it somehow infiltrates our work in some shape or form. And I just went unapologetically hard with it. I contacted every news person or website, and I just was pushing. I canvassed the street, and I wanted to get it out there, because I think I just wanted to do a little bit of good. I think there's enough people who are self-serving and competitive and only looking out for themselves, that I can't complain about that if I am that too. And so I thought, what a great example or great experience to, once again, be a part of the solution. So it was probably one of the most positive experiences I've done. And, of course, I had my work in there too. And that was nice. That was great. But it was more fulfilling to meet all these other people. And, to hear the positive feedback. And of course, it's something, that type of idea is something that I want to do again and again. It's like, be a part of the solution, always be part of the solution.
Yeah, how did you feel? Because you open it up. I've done a fair few things of that. It sort of reminds me of one of the first exhibitions I did was at a knitting and stitching show, and this was in 2011 or something. And at the time, there was barely Instagram. There's this website called Craftster, which was loads of message boards for people doing crafts and things. But it was putting it out there and not knowing what you're going to get. And that's the thing that's interesting to me with these projects is you do an open call. You don't know what you're going to get. You have to have faith, don't you, that somehow it's going to pan out. But there's that sort of crazy alchemy where you could end up with nothing. As you say, you can be overwhelmed with responses, and then you have to be able to curate that to some extent. How did you feel going through that process?
I really love chaos. I think that makes life interesting. And I think you just have to let it happen and give up control. I try with most of my life, besides some of my daily routines, to give up control, at least in my creative outputs, where you just let the magic happen, and whatever happens, happen. Of course, when I was putting out calls to say, okay, I'm looking for this, who knows photographers, who knows abstract artists, who knows this, can you contact your friends? And I'm looking for something realistic. And, you just accept what you get. And again, if, I didn't get some soft sculpture, I didn't, that's fine. I keep on saying, there's so much tragedy and terrible things happening in the planet that we can calm down. It's not a big deal. It's just art. It's not that crazy. It's not that deep. I mean, art is deep, but it's just a show, and I'm not going to freak out if I don't get X or Y.
Yeah. It's not like a human life coming into the world that'll either be alive or dead, is it? It is just things.
Again, I think, like I said, I take my work and my practice very seriously. But again, I step out of myself and I realize that I'm just stitching and beading and painting, and it doesn't matter. So yeah, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, there's always a balance, isn't there, between the vision that you have with these things. and what reality offers. And then I guess it's stoicism, isn't it? It's how you manage that tension and the sort of being willing to just let go to. It's not always easy. It isn't. And I mean, I've done things where, like, I did this Christmas tree once. There was a 20-foot high Christmas tree, and we invited people to cross-stitch baubles. So they had 4 patterns to choose from. I just put it out there. And for a while, I was like, there's only 5, and my Christmas tree is 20 foot high or whatever. And then eventually you get to a point, I think in the end we had like 600 or something. So it's kind of a relief. But there's nothing you can do. You're kind of powerless, aren't you? You just got to let the gods collide. But I mean, the eclecticism of the network that you built, that you kind of created, that must have been super rewarding.
It was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm always kind of in search of community, in search of like-minded people. It's something that I really enjoy doing. I moved a lot in my life. And then also I didn't realize how important community was until I picked up my life during COVID, and I moved to Germany and I knew no one and I didn't speak the language very well. So any way to kind of connect that. And then I also see, again, the art world can be very challenging and it can be very competitive. How do we kind of break that down and then just all realize we're similar people? And I think I kind of like obsessively not watch the news, but try to stay informed. And I love a podcast, and I love a political podcast. And I see how much turmoil is happening in the world and all these tragedies, that I like to think that we are more like-minded than we give off. And I think it's better to try to go into the world with kindness and try to find a common ground. And I say that as a minority who deals with homophobia and blah, 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 all that stuff. But how do we find those connecting things? Because I think we're more like each other than sometimes we like to think.
Yeah. So I have a position of weakness in our conversation, right? Sort of, because I'm like cis white heteronormative male. I'm just like Mr. Middle Average white guy. Do you know what I mean? So I'm really interested. I really want to understand your take on all this, because, like, so I've Mr. X stitched it. I've gone, men do needlework. And that's the story in and of itself. It's that discourse against, men and women, art and craft and all those sorts of things. But yours is so much more nuanced than that and has so many extra layers to it. I'm really interested to understand, like, what are the assumptions that I'm going to make that are completely wrong? Like, tell me immediately where I'm going wrong, if you can.
Well, I mean, this is a hill I'll die on, and I'm sure someone won't like this. But when I was curating the show, I said we also need cis white or cis men as well, because straight people, cis people, that's also showing diversity. Diversity isn't just showing, the one-off person, this most marginalized person. That's not what diversity is. And so I want to have like a completely inclusive show. In at least my experience in Vancouver was that when it comes to marginalized communities, no one actually wants to look at the systemic problems or what these communities are actually facing. What they want to do is very performative, and they'll go, oh, we care about trans people. We care about, POC people. They'll look for like the most marginalized person, give them an opportunity. But then there's people who are maybe like slightly less marginalized, or maybe somewhere in the middle, and then they don't get any opportunity. But then their voices aren't heard because they're not palatable enough for like the other end of the binary. And I think, again, I like to look at the world in gray zones, where it's like, I know in many ways, especially having a child and trying to navigate that world, which has been absolutely insane. I feel very othered much of the time, but I still am fully aware of all my privilege as being white, as being cis, as being, both my husband and I are like very palatable gay men. We're not pushing any boundaries, and that's not a cognizant decision. That's just who we are as people. And so I'm very, very aware of it. So instead of being angry about that, it's like, whatever privilege you have, I think you need to kind of always pay it forward. And it's not speaking for someone, but if you can give a platform, that's kind of the best thing you can do. So, or include them in your show, or, but then also treat them like an equal and not like a thing. So they should still, I think, don't be put off by a story, maybe because it makes you uncomfortable. Maybe, it is, say, about gender or gender expression or whatnot. They should still go under the same kind of magnifying glass of anyone. Say if they submit org, say if you're curating a show, and you should still look at their work And, is it of the caliber you're after? But if the subject matter is making you uncomfortable, you should let go of your biases and still include it. So it's kind of like, I've been to shows where it felt as though the work wasn't that great of caliber, and the only reason why this show was there was because it was just from a marginalized voice, and I don't think it did that person any justice. And again, I know that's probably, someone's probably gonna get mad at me for saying that, but it's like there's nuance to it, and it's not just this or that. I think we have to take a bit more time with these things and not be afraid to have those discussions.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you there. I think it's probably the hardest thing to negotiate is you kind of want work that has artistic merit as underpinning, whether it's made by a person of any composition is almost like secondary, sort of, isn't it? That's the balance you have to take. And it's really hard, isn't it? Because there's enough people who will take you down because of the decisions that you make. It's hard, isn't it? Because you're going, this person is the most marginalized person, but their work's shit. And this person's done some good work and they're just straight white guy or whatever. It's like,
and I also think it does a disservice. I've been a part of queer shows where it's like, oh, the through line is being queer, where it does disservice to our stories. I say in media, we kind of get a few stories. We get coming out, rejection, and usually dying of HIV or I guess you'd be dying of AIDS. That's all we get. I've never seen a show of two dads doing surrogacy, and it's like the storylines are so shallow, and so, and it's not that there's a lack of people who want to express something different, or that, yes, there's many people, and also in my life where like my main identity was being queer, I was experiencing it, but I have so much more to say, and so much more to say about being queer and what that experience is. But like I said, I think you have to be a little bit more critical about it. And even if you're curating a show, also, I think it's important that you have to be very careful if you're going to be curating a show about a topic that you are not part of, if it's not your story. So like a man curating a show about like women's rights or something like that, you had to have the right. That happens a lot. It happens a lot where it's like a straight writer making a movie about a gay person, or a man making a movie about a woman, or a parent person who's not a parent making a movie about being a parent. Like there's nuance that you don't understand. And it's just like not including enough voices or the proper voices into whatever we're doing.
Yeah, we're trying to do a thing. So this building that I was saying about before, we're opening an art gallery in the centre of a town. Our town's really culturally diverse because it was a sort of working town. So there's really strong communities of different backgrounds: East Timor, Asian, Filipino, Black African, Eastern European. And we want to develop a program of kind of festivals that celebrate these cultures. And then we want to look at other cultures as well, whether it's queer culture, street art culture, hip hop culture, all of these things. Every single festival we've thought of, I've gone, hi, I'm a straight white middle-aged man. I am the least helpful person in this situation, because I just am. I'm just the guy in the middle, We might have to, they have like real ale festivals for us where men drink beer and talk about the price of a pig. So I feel like we're covered, but it's interesting, that thing. You're quite right. What's nice with our philosophy, I think, is very much we're going to try and be an amplifier. So we're going to support community groups by just giving them the ability to build better shows, to produce bigger things, using the infrastructure and stuff. So very much not dictating the agenda. One of the questions I've got is, I talk to a lot of artists who are in the world of textiles or with needlework. And there's always this thing about the work that they present. Are they a textile artist, or are they an artist using textiles? That comes up a lot, because you don't want to be pigeonholed just by your medium. As someone who's queer, as someone who's bipolar, do those things, are they labels that you lean into, or are those labels you'd much rather be an artist who happens to be queer, who happens to be bipolar? How does the weighting of those labels fit in with your work and the stuff you're trying to say?
I think it just depends on the topic, really. There's pieces that are fully about mental illness or being neurodivergent. And then there's pieces that are really leaning into my queer identity, but then there's pieces that aren't. And I think you can flop between the two. And I've recently, after the last year and a half, kind of discovered that you don't have to brand yourself. You don't have to identify as anything. I think if we live in a more fluid space, and I mean this with everything, including sexuality, gender expression, whatever it may be, exist in a more gray fluid space. And however you're feeling, it's if I'm doing, a quilt, which I do love quilting and I do love all that handwork and making little ornaments, then it's not art, it's just like a textile project. But then there's lots of pieces that have such maybe little to no textile work, that I'm an artist. And I think you can just let it be a bit more organic and focus on the process of the piece and not the label. I think for a long time, the label pigeon held me. I was like, oh, is there enough embroidery? People know me for the embroidery, but then I was having all these other ideas or making all this other work and they didn't have embroidery. Then I felt like it was like a sham because that's how people know me. But I think once again, it's not that complicated. Just do the work, do the thing, and not think too much about it.
Do you feel that it's part of the process? I can remember starting doing my needlework journey and sometimes doing stuff that felt very masculine, almost like I was getting out of my system. Even when people start doing cross-stitch and then cross-stitch load of F-bombs, because they're going up against that existing tension and kind of working their way through it. Do you feel like there's a certain amount of that process within which you as an artist process your... we all do, but are you able to reflect back on a time when you might have lent into the queer thing, almost like you were working through that so that then you can find your volume levels within that context?
For many years, I was heavily influenced by, the Instagramification of it all, of having a very aesthetic profile, or I had some voices in my ear who were very supportive in one direction and not in the other direction. And I wasn't as authentic. Moving to Germany and showing in Berlin really kind of blew my mind open. And the first pieces that I did that were overtly queer were my effects of failure pieces of kind of like beefcake muscle men flexing. And all the pieces of the background were built from failed works. And it was like this idea of that pressure of being a man, that pressure of being a gay man, that pressure of success, all that pressure. And I submitted it to a show in Berlin, and it was a fetish show. And, wrote a piece about it's the fetishization of success and whiteness and masculinity and muscles and all these things. And so then I was like, I felt like really out there. I felt like for me, this work was really in your face. And then I get to the show. And as I always say, on the binary of porn to Jesus, my work was Jesus. And then it just went to the complete opposite direction. I don't know if you can use that story in this podcast.
It's a whole new world opens up in front of you.
Yeah. And it was very, I was like, oh, wow, I can definitely go stronger. And being in Berlin and in these shows, I was like, I can have a louder voice and I need to have a louder voice because the ideas are there, but I kind of shrunk them down a little bit, And so I think getting inspired by people who are not afraid to be loud or not afraid to ruffle feathers.
This is my podcast and people who listen to it have to put up with my jokes. So that's probably the worst thing that's going to happen. I am very interested to understand the nature of some of the other works presented within that show, because I'm like, if your stuff, and I'm not saying anything about your stuff, but if your stuff was mild, what other things were there? Can you?
So it's the gallery is called the Knast, and it is old women's prison. It is part hotel, part daycare, part queer art gallery. It's Berlin. And so they didn't renovate it. It's 3 levels and the cells are still there, and each little cell would be a room. And so I had my embroideries in a cell next to giant pornographic photos, just massive. And it was like, let's just say there was people in positions, there was flowers, places, there was a lot of really beautiful paintings. It was quite a spectacular show. It was really well done. There's a lot of talent there, but it was kind of mind blowing. I'm like, well, I think I could definitely push it. It's also Berlin. If anyone's ever been to Berlin, it's quite an expressive place, which I do love.
Yeah. That's it. So, and when was that?
That was, I think 2023, I think.
Right. Okay. So it's a couple of years down the road then. Do you feel can you feel yourself becoming more expressive? Is that coming forth?
Definitely. The last year and a half or 2 years was the hardest, most impossible moment of my life. Really, life almost fell apart. It was really, really quite terrible. And before I left Germany to go to Canada to be a parent, I would say, my goal with my art is to be the antithesis of nihilism. I want everything to have meaning and purpose, and I'm such an optimistic person. And, my work was very colorful and bright and, just happy-go-lucky, running through the Bavarian countryside hills with our dog. And then after it, I kind of connected. I felt like I was 17 again when I was like the most angry. I was like bullied really bad. It's also like, 2007. I'm like a punk kid, listen to screamo, just hating the world. And my work was really aggressive. And I felt reconnected with that version of myself. And it's utilizing my art and my pieces in a very cathartic experience. Because like I said, I went through a lot of tragedy, a lot of hard experiences. Like I'm currently working on a piece where, all my work that I have, I'm cutting up and changing. Like I'm redoing everything. And the pieces that I'm not keeping, I just have cut up into circles. I have cut about 13,000 circles that I'm attaching together. And so if anyone goes to my website, it's basically, I don't know, an obituary of old work.
It's like the Internet Archive, isn't it? It's pages that are no longer there.
Yeah, I'm like, they're dead. Like you can look at them, but they're all dead. They're all in circles. I don't have my studio set up, but the living room is filled with scraps and circles right now. So it's a great way to kind of cathartically heal from some tragic experiences.
It is, but I still wish I had some of my old school books from when I was a kid.
So what I do is I obsessively journal, I obsessively collect, I obsessively document. Like I said, I'm a complete obsessive person over it. But I like things very organized and clean. So I don't throw anything out. Instead, I will make a sketchbook.
Okay.
So I have three sketchbooks of old pieces, old paintings, or like the 13,000 circles. I have pieces that are 20 years old that I've just kind of held on to. And I like things organized and clean. I'm a little OCD about that, where I don't like just a box of photos. I like the photos in the album so you can look through them. And so you can get a glimpse about it, but not the whole thing.
Yeah. Organized chaos.
Yeah. You just need to just make a memory, hold on to the memory.
So then, like when you said, you moved to Berlin and it reminds you of 2007 and you're that kid. Like I still play Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. And I got that when I was like 15 or something. And it was definitely an album that changed my life because I got into that kind of music for a long time. But now when I play it, I can look back with fondness, but I appreciate the music differently. Your choice to recycle your work and reuse that work, is that akin to that, do you think? Do you think it's an opportunity for you to look back on the work and do something different with it? Maybe like a remix or something like that. Is that part of the process?
Not really. It's more so the reason why I rework my work is kind of a few things. First is I grew up quite poor, and so I never was able to afford the proper materials. So I had to get very creative, instead of paints, it would be like nail polishes or whatnot. So I like having restraints. I think work becomes a bit more interesting if you have some constraints with what you're doing. The other thing is I am very cognizant of our dying planet and the state of the environment. And then I'm also really cognizant of the fact that a lot of my materials are plastic or, made out of petroleum, polyester threads or plastic paillettes or plastics or acrylic paint. A lot of people are not aware of that or they don't like to think about it. And so I don't want to make something and throw it out and I know it's not going to go anywhere. And for me, I work a lot and I make a lot of pieces that pretty quickly because I started to refocus on art about a decade ago. I was producing so much work and it just was piling up in my studio. And the crazy thing about being an artist is that to get better at your skill, you have to make work, but it's a lot of work that no one's going to want or buy. And it's probably just going to end up in the trash. Like if you're a dancer, you can just dance. If you're a musician, you can just play your instrument and it's fine. Whereas an artist, you're producing kind of stuff. And sometimes you're producing crap.
If you were a dancer and every footprint appeared, then you'd be dealing with it, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Right. If it's like an inch off the floor, your room would shrink down. So that was another thing. And then the last is as I've progressed and had experiences, when I first started making art, I had hair and I had no tattoos. And then I got older, got balder, got grayer, had tattoos, had scars. It's like we don't get a fresh start. I love the concept of wabi sabi, where if anyone's not familiar with it, it's like a Japanese. It's more than just an aesthetic concept, but it's like nothing is ever finished and age makes something more beautiful. Where I like the stories that are told. I like quilts that are made out of old clothing. There's history with each of those pieces, and it makes it more interesting. So as I rework pieces, because like I don't become a new person just because I change jobs, change location, change cities. I have a whole history with me. I can't get rid of those things, and I like to propel that into my art. So I have a little circle. One of my first paintings was a pop art version of the statue of David. And I've held on to that for, God, what is that, 20 something years. And now that is in the piece because that's like a fingerprint of mine. So leaning into that idea of showing that history, just like as people, it's, you have a scar, then you have a tattoo over the scar, then you have a scar over the tattoo, then there's a tan, then there's a mole. Build these layers. You can't fake that. Like I've always celebrated age, and I think if I can show that with art, I think that's even more magical.
Yeah, sometimes there's little time capsules, aren't there? Little truth windows from the past. So it's interesting because it's not then like you're just saying this old work is rubbish. Just want to annihilate it and make something different with it. It's being a bit more conscientious than that. It's more about not wasting these things, but allowing the journey to fade.
I mean, sometimes work is just rubbish. Sometimes I do love, I don't know if I can say this, but like I do love a shit post.
Yeah.
Where there's a piece that's just not great, and it uses a lot of beads, and I don't want to throw the beads out because beads are expensive, and so I'll cut the beads off, video it, and people get really mad at me for cutting it up, but I think it's quite funny. Some things are not great. I have a few pieces that I won't touch and I feel really proud of, but a lot of it I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's a lot of material. That's a lot of paillettes. That's a lot of beads. Those are expensive. And so, or I'll reuse the fabric, whatnot. And it's not about, what it was, what it was just, I learned something from it, but some things I like the history of it. I'm really proud of it, but the life of that work is dead. And then some pieces are just garbage and a total, failure of a work, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, because I've spoken to artists who'll go back and like reframe or remix their own work. Like they'll take existing pieces and work further on them some years down the line, like after a period of time. But you're not really doing that, are you? You're just letting it be like that piece was finished and it was good enough at the time, but time moves on and so does the work, or so does the medium.
For me, making art is a cathartic experience. It's getting something in my head out. And then once it's out to the world, I like to show it. I want people to see it, but then I don't really care about it. I mean, there was a time where I lost $35,000 worth of work in the mail because the gallery mislabeled it. That was fun.
Holy crap. Yeah.
Yeah. Right before a solo show, my first in Germany, and I was waiting for these pieces. So I hope someone has found the box and it's hanging in someone's house. Otherwise, it's probably rotting in the ground. So I don't really want that to happen again. But I always think would be really cool for like one of my paintings to get spray painted, or I don't know. I love Andy Warhol is probably my favorite artist. I mean, very problematic, but I think it's fantastic. And the painting that was shot, I think that would be really cool. So once my work is out there, I don't want people to take away from it. That would kind of suck. But like having someone graffiti it or like stab it or kick it, I don't know, that just shows life and energy, and it doesn't bother me. Everyone's like, people treat their art like babies, where for me it was the experience of it. And yeah, I don't really care.
I've got a friend who's
sorry. I recently just like buried 6 paintings in the ground. So
did you? Excellent.
Dig them up in the new year and see what happens to them. And everyone's like, what? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to someone who went to like art college, and their teacher was making them do that with like textiles that have been buried for like 6 months and stuff. It's like, yeah, fair play, to be honest. I mean, why not? Yeah, I've got a friend who's a decollage artist, so he tends to make work like collage, but using torn down posters that he's picked up in like Manchester town centre and that sort of thing. And again, it's just an interesting one, almost like giving someone permission to take your song and run with it. It's like a book that's rewritten out of copyright, or a song that's just remixed and pulled apart. Yeah, it's fascinating because some people are too cautious, too precious for that. It takes a lot of I always think when you, like we were talking before about the alchemy of having an open show, there's a fearlessness that is overwhelming to some people, and yet people like yourself clearly thrive in that space.
It's that tension. I grew up as a punk kid, and I like that tension. I like the sparkle next to the chaos. I like, letting something be very controlled next to something that is uncontrolled. And I think that tension is very interesting. I think that's being a human. That's our experiences. We try to be so controlled over our life, and we can have the most extreme regimented day, but then something always gets thrown at us. And I like that energy between the two elements. I think my favorite, one of my favorite designers, Alexander McQueen, he had this dress of razor clamshells, and on the runway show, the model was ripping them off and destroying them. Or Martin Margiela, another favorite designer, it was impeccably designed, impeccably tailored clothing, but then also with chaos of like paint and torn seams. And I think it creates a lot of interest within work. And I try to emulate that with what I do. And I think with a lot of textile artists or cross stitchers or quilters, we are very proud of our craft and we hyperfixate on making it perfect. Or it goes to the complete other side and it's extremely organic. And I like when those worlds kind of collide and meet.
I hope this isn't speaking out of turn. Does your neurodiversity tie in with that at all?
Oh, totally. The world I live in, I've realized the older I get, I'm like, people, unless someone also is neurodivergent, those people I get, and the people who are not, I don't know how they think. Like the chaos or how I experience things, it is purely reflected in my work. And if someone doesn't view it that way, I don't understand why. Like, I just don't get it. Like I had the realization that most people, when there's a problem, they don't hyperfixate on a solution and think of it and try to act on it immediately. And then my husband's like, no, a lot of people don't do that. I'm like, what? I'm like, you're not trying to think of a solution immediately and get to the finish line immediately? He's like, no, that's not what happens. So the older I get, I kind of realize that it's particular to how my brain is wired.
Yeah, my oldest daughter, Flora, appears to be heading in a similar direction. So if she has an idea, the most annoying thing is when she has a good idea about 10 minutes before we need to leave the house for school, because I really need her to get her shoes and her coat on, and she's going off and drawing some kind of plan for a system by which a bug can be rescued from a puddle or something. And I'm just like, okay, but it's an unstoppable force, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to do it. Like, I'm trying to learn. My baby, she needs to eat and feed and get cuddles. And sometimes I'm forced to take naps like I had to do before podcast. We had to take a nap together because she wouldn't sleep without me. It's teaching me to calm down, because before this, I could easily work 14-hour days. My fingers would be bleeding. I would just tape them and then continue going. And then the tape would be filled with blood and I would retape them. And John's like, my husband's like, you need to calm down. So it's teaching me to slow. I'm trying, failing sometimes, but
no. Congratulations, celebrate the wins. Honestly,
yeah.
But so with that work modality, then if you're doing a piece of work and you're working for 14 hours and the thing isn't finished, how do you qualify that? How do you say I have done as much as I can do for now, while the urge to finish the thing still persists?
If I had it my way, it would be until my eyes can't stay open. That's
okay. Yeah.
I was trying to finish a piece for a competition quite a few years back, and I think I was sleeping about 3 hours, and I was just living off of coffee and I think cookies and working. I'm kind of built for this. I'm built for really labor intensive work. That's kind of why I picked up embroidery and stopped doing just abstract work, because it wasn't hard enough. I feel like if it's not hard, if I'm not in pain, doesn't qualify as work for me. Like, that's too easy. I'm like, what? I couldn't be a minimal artist. I absolutely could not.
Have you considered gold work or Japanese embroidery or some of these really intensely perfect ones, just to throw an extra? I hope I haven't just triggered you then.
No, I have tried. Like, I like the chaos, but then I have done some things where it's all about, I started picking up cross stitch 2 years ago, not last year, but the year before. And I really liked how precise it was, because normally I'm more organic, but that was quite interesting to do as well. So, if you do the same thing, it gets boring. So I like to hop between tasks, but I do love doing something perfectly. It's quite satisfying.
Yeah, I think you'd get a lot. Like, if you haven't looked into gold work, like, it's so beautiful, couching gold threads and all that. That takes real precision, real slowness, real long time. I mean, that might just push all your buttons, and I'm sorry if it does. But then you said once about there was a metaphor of trying to hang a painting on a boat while other people are working on the land. And I found that very interesting because, again, I guess it's talking to this. It's stuff I don't understand. So I'm just taking the opportunity to kind of get your perspective. But what do you think that instability gives you?
So, kind of what I meant by that is I'm given all the tools, but I'm on a boat. So, like, I have a painting in a level, but you're on a boat. So, you're always kind of going back and forth. So, my existence is I always have these ebbs and flows of mood and emotion. Well, where it's I just have a down, I have an up. Sometimes it's euphoric and sometimes it's extremely depressive. And so the colors are brighter or the colors are darker. And I had a friend recently open up to me that he had a manic episode, and he was asking me how do I deal with it? And I said, lean into it. Like, lean into the mania, lean into, if you have to clean everything, if you have to dust everything, if you have to work, just lean into it and stop. I think we try to feign being, I'm going to do air quotes, like normal. And the more people I meet, I think more people are neurodivergent than we think there are. With maybe it's AD, because like neurodivergent can be, if you're on the autistic spectrum, it can be bipolar, it could be ADHD. Those are all being neurodivergent. And I think a lot of us are somewhere there or have it in some sort of form. And I think we just like lean into it and just know what you are. If you have to do something, as long as it's not problematic or harmful in a certain way, if you have to do something a certain way, just like lean into it. And so for me, I lean into the pain, I lean into the euphoria, I lean into that, and I create work. And so right now, my work is extremely angry and extremely violent. And instead of pretending that I'm fine, like on the outside I'm fine, but inside of what I experience, I'm not fine. And so I want to make work that expresses that, because my goal is when people view my work, they feel a connection to it, try to find an emotion, a through line, and people go, I went through that too, or I get that emotion. And that's what I want to do. And I think if we're all too like, that Instagramification of the world where we're trying to be like our best selves, that's not real.
Yeah. And does the process of making the art that reflects your mood at the time, does that help change the mood, or is it unrelated? You're just making good use of the time?
No, it does help, especially when I have a topic that I have a lot of anxiety over, or it's been really hard or harmful. It helps me think about it, process it, because my pieces don't take days. It could take weeks or sometimes months. So by the time I'm done the work, I've kind of thought through it, done more research, and then added some things. And then I'm kind of done with that idea or concept.
Yeah. It's something I feel so nonchalant. It's ridiculous sometimes, even understanding my daughter's emerging neurodivergence, it makes me feel I've got people I work with in the gallery space as well. I touch wood, I'm very boring, I'm very sort of normal in the middle. I'm sure everybody's got their own quirks, like you say, I think, but yeah, it's interesting to understand those perspectives. I appreciate you talking with me about it, because it gives me a framework with which I can better understand like the way floor is, that.
Because the thing is it doesn't go away. You can pretend you're fine, but like it's that itch you have to do it. So if I have an idea, I have to write it down. Or if I have to go do a thing, my husband usually goes like, say, for whatever reason, I need to iron or I need to dust something. And he's like, do I need a help or do you just need to do it? I'm like, I just need to do it. Don't worry. Like, you just you just scratch the itch and then you're fine. And that's kind of how I navigate it. I always say in my day, I have these like tent poles of things that I do that make me feel productive. And then I have space for the rest. And so if I, don't hit those tent poles, I'm a little bit more chaotic or a little bit more uncentered. But within age, I've learned how to articulate it and let my family in, don't have shame about it, wear it as a badge of honor that I was able to be an amazing merchandiser. I was able to be an amazing manager and all these things because of those experiences, because I can hyper focus, or because I can, just keep on going. Like, those things make me what I am. And again, it's like not having the shame, but learning how to deal and work with it.
Yeah. And then for those around you, do you have code words for your husband where he understands that it's best to just let you crack on, no harm done and all that sort of thing?
We have in the past, but now I'm able to articulate kind of at the beginning of the day where I'm at. And I'm able to say like, I'm feeling this way and I don't know why. And then he knows me well enough. He's like, okay, let me know if we need to talk about it. And same with his parents are quite supportive. So if I'm just feeling a certain way, I just express it. And if I'm able to not try to hide it or talk about it, it's usually not as bad.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, go for a run or kind of like burn off that energy.
Yeah. I have a similar thing. I know if I've eaten too much chocolate, it isn't the same. But I know if I wake up and I'm a right grumpy twat, it's because I've been hard on the Toblerones or something.